Welcome to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, brought to you by Pilma. This podcast helps lead lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Here is your legal marketing expert and host, Ken Hardison.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Grow Your Law Firm. And today we are honored to have Matt Dubin of Dubin Law Firm out of Seattle, Washington, and other states, I think, coming. We're going to talk about his tremendous growth over the last 10 years and how he did it. Welcome for coming aboard.
Hi, Ken. I appreciate you having me on again.
Yeah. So for those that might not know you, can you kind of tell us your story? Like, how'd you get started? How'd you get into law? And kind of tell us your journey, like A to B or whatever, A to Z.
Yeah, I'll try to do the short version. I grew up in the East Coast, suburban New York, went to Yale undergrad, moved out to the West Coast, put everything I owned in my car and drove out to Seattle for law school at University of Washington. Graduated in 95. I got a job during law school working for a personal injury guy and loved the work and never really considered doing anything else after that. So I went to work for him when I passed the bar, worked for him for about 2.5 years, and then he lost a really big med mal case that, he was into for more than $100,000 of his own money. And after that case, he told me he wasn't going to be able to pay me anymore. So it was a decision point. And I was even considering maybe not practicing law anymore after that. But I took a chance and I made him a proposal. Let me stay in your office. Let me use your phone system and your computers. Toss me like 10 cases to get me started. And instead of you paying me salary, I'll pay you rent. And we worked off half my rent doing contract work and half the rent with cash. So I had very low overhead. I only had a few cases. It was very lean. I think we grossed 12,000 in year one and 18,000 in year two. And again, I was ready to give up. Then the start of year three, we closed a big case for me. I think that third year we ended up grossing like 45,000. Along the way, my wife was in a car accident. We settled that for her and kind of lived off that for another year. And it just kind of snowballed from there. I was solo. I started the firm in December 98. I didn't hire my first employee until 2007. I did everything by myself because I was terrified of, with the uncertainty of this business, I didn't want to be responsible for somebody else's livelihood. And also every law firm I ever worked at was a really toxic environment with yelling and, backstabbing. And I just didn't want any of that in my workplace. So I just never hired anybody. And I got to a point in 2007 where I was doing everything right, but I couldn't keep up. I couldn't bring in enough money. I couldn't do enough work by myself. It was actually my in-laws who suggested, I needed help. I needed to hire an employee. And I did it. I overcame that fear. And within 6 months, we tripled cash flow just by bringing in one assistant, letting me focus on the things that I was good at. And that was 2007. And she was the first of my employees who went back to law school and became a lawyer. I probably have like 20 or 30 lawyers now who are like Dubin Law alumni. The third assistant that I hired in 2010 was right out of law school. She hadn't passed the bar yet. I hired her, then she passed the bar, and I would have been an idiot not to use her as an attorney. So now we're 2 attorneys with no assistant. So I had to go out and hire another employee number 3, right? And it just kind of snowballed from there. We went from 3 to 5 to 7. And then I joined Pilma, and I started for the first time thinking about my law firm as a business instead of just kind of a hobby or something that I did that I was good at, and really started developing a growth plan, started building systems, having annual meetings, setting goals. And the growth really just accelerated from 2010, 2012. 2010, I joined Pilma. 2012, I joined Mastermind. And it really just kind of started accelerating from there. My first really, really big fee was in 2017, my first $1 million fee. And I plowed every penny of it back into the firm, to my wife's dismay. And, she would ask me, why do you love the firm more than you love me? But she gets it now. She gets it now. And so the growth accelerated and we started doing TV and radio and digital. And now we're doing everything. We're everywhere. We're probably, at least in terms of media spend, we're number one in the Seattle market. We've expanded to the whole state of Washington. We've got attorneys licensed in Oregon and Idaho. And we've got growth plans for now in the Pacific Northwest. And then we'll see where it leads. But we're up to around 90 people. Last year was our biggest year ever. Our revenues were up probably 40% from 24 to 25. But more importantly, our profits were up for the first time to what I consider an acceptable level, right? So now the challenge is moving forward to grow profitably and to grow on current revenues and not have to go into debt to do it. And that's been a real persistent challenge for me over the years. So that's kind of the nutshell of where I started and where I am now.
1 to 90.
Yeah.
Wow. How many lawyers you got now, Matt?
We have, it's either 16 or 18 lawyers, including me.
Right. So once you got over the hurdle, you just put the pedal to the metal.
We just kept going. I think we had 6 consecutive years of 100% year over year revenue growth. The problem was like that kind of growth stretches you so thin that most years it was like less, it was like 5% profit margin. We were literally growing faster than we could grow revenues. And, with personal injury, the cases we sign up today are going to be revenues next year or the following year. But you have to staff up for the caseload you have today. Right. So the expenses are always kind of leading the revenues by about 18 months or so. And so as long as you're scaling that aggressively, it's really hard to maintain a healthy profit margin. I mean, there were years when some of my attorneys were making a lot more money than I was making, but they haven't gone anywhere. I've been able to retain really good attorney talent because of that.
Great. So nominal growth. I know the numbers you're doing, I'm not going to reveal them, but I know you're the mastermind, and that's part of what we have to do is what we're doing, the growth, the net, everything. But I want you to share what you think, like the 4 or 5 most important things. If a lawyer came to you and say, "Listen, I'm a solo practitioner, or maybe I've got lawyers and 10 staff, and I feel like I'm stuck," what would you tell? What would you tell them, like 3 to 5 keys that you're doing, thinking about, whatever were like really keys for you? Your 100% growth for 6 years. And what was it?
So it's challenging because in different phases of growth, you need to be doing different things. And I want to go all the way back to the very first PILMA event I ever attended. I had no idea what I was walking into. It was 2010 in Vegas. I think it wasn't Caesars, it was somewhere else, somewhere in Vegas. And the keynote speaker was Michael Gerber. The E-Myth for lawyers isn't that good, but the E-Myth Revisited is a very good book. And it's become cliche at this point, some of the stuff in his book, right? Like work on your business, not in your business. He challenged us in his keynote speech back in 2010. Go back home and open a management office across town from your law firm and spend at least 1 day a week outside the law firm in your management office working on the business. And I thought he was crazy. Like, there's no way I could do that. There's so many demands on my time that how could I step away from the law firm for a whole day? Another thing he said in the book is think, and I'll get to specific concrete things, but this is what started my mind working, right? Is he says in the book, think of your business as a franchise prototype, right? And even if you never intend to expand or scale or sell or something like that, if you think about McDonald's, right? It's a consistent experience at every McDonald's everywhere you go. And it's because it's built on well-documented systems and processes that can be scaled and duplicated that don't require my hands-on. I doubt that Ray Kroc ever cooked a hamburger, but he turned McDonald's into, a little neighborhood burger joint into what it is today. And so what I think you could do if you're small, right? You're one attorney and a couple staff and you feel like you can't grow. First, I want to say the challenge is real. And when you don't have money, it's all about generating caseload. And like, I remember my first 5, 6 years in Pilma, I didn't care about the management side. For me, it was about lead generation. How do I sign new cases? How do I get new clients? And so I guess I'll start with that. Like, how do you grow your caseload when you don't have a whole lot of money? You don't have the luxury of spending on branding because you need direct response. Every penny you spend needs to generate a return. It needs to generate a client. So you use the greatest resource you have, which is yourself and your time, right? So you blog, you podcast, you write a book, you go to community centers and senior centers and schools and nonprofits, and you just offer them your time for free, right? And you just ask them, let me go and give a free lecture on what to do if you've been in a car accident or how to optimize your car insurance so that, if you're in a wreck, you're going to be protected, your family's going to be protected. And if you have a book or you have some other materials, you give it away at the event. You do community events, you get involved with nonprofits, and then you leverage all that in your social media and you build a following, right? And that's all free. That's all more or less free. Advertising is a lot harder. And I've always loved advertising. I've done everything from, little ads in the university newspaper to like pasting up flyers on light poles around town. Networking. I didn't mention networking. If you're not setting aside 1 or 2 or more like hours a week to go sit down with a potential referral source and build a relationship, then you're leaving money on the table. It's part of the job. And so these are all things that maybe you're buying a doctor lunch, but these are all things that don't cost very much. But you've got to build that traction, right? And you can generate steady growth in caseload just by doing all these things. You need a good website. You need a good web presence. SEO has gotten really, really hard. Again, unless you have money, and now with AI, like everything's changing with even SEO and digital, but you need, like, however people learn about you, the first thing they're going to do is check you out online, whether it's through your socials or through your website. So you've got to have a good, well-developed, well-thought-out online presence. But even before that, take a step back, right? You need to have an identity. You need to know who you are. You need to know what's important to you, right? In marketing and sales, they talk about your USP, right? Your unique selling proposition. It's a little crass to me, USP. I just think know who you are. Like have an identity. Know what your core values are. Everybody has core values, but a lot of times they're not articulated. They're not even really consciously understood. And it's not just corporate speak, right? Like there's substance to it. You have core values, even if you don't know what they are yet. So a period of introspection, right? To ask yourself, what's important to me? What do I prioritize? What kind of experience do I want my clients to have? What value am I adding to the world? And then put that in words and then make that your touchstone, right? This is how I do everything. And when in doubt, I go back to those core values and it makes the decision easy, right? So for me, going back to even my prior experience at other law firms and things like that, and this was later. This was like 2015. This was after I read Traction by Gino Wickman. That was the next book after the E-Myth that I think had a big influence on me. And it was really about your core values and being able to like articulate them and incorporate them in everything you do. And for me, it was gratitude, empathy, and compassion. And that's pretty unique among law firms. It's pretty unique among any like business organization. We do all the other things, aggression and honesty and integrity and perseverance. Like we've got all those things. But at the end of the day, like we've got gratitude, empathy, and compassion up on the wall in big vinyl decals. And I tell every single employee at my firm, when you're in doubt about how to respond to a client or how to deal with an obnoxious claims adjuster or a doctor who won't provide the medical records or whatever it is, you go back to gratitude, empathy, and compassion, and you figure out what kind of response is consistent with those values it's going to serve our client and get us what we need. And so, like, my firm acts in a certain way. And people who aren't comfortable, who aren't aligned with those values, first, we do a good job kind of weeding them out at the interview process. But if they're in the organization and they're not aligned with that, they tend to filter themselves out within a year or two because it doesn't work for them. Right. So, number one, know who you are, make it part of everything you do. Number two, like, your time is your greatest resource and leverage it and go out and hustle. And you've just got to hustle until you get lucky and you hit a big one. And look, I was in practice for 20 years before I got my first $1 million fee. I had $1 million cases with no insurance, and I had big insurance policies with flawed cases, right? But you need to get to a point of critical mass with cash on hand where you can actually accelerate the growth through investing in marketing and actually building a recognizable brand. And so I'll stop there because I've talked a lot, but that's kind of early phase stuff that you could be doing. Like, never feel hopeless. There's always a referral out there. You just have to go out and you have to hustle it. And so I have a totally different perspective on, like, once you have that seed money and you start doing more advertising and you start growing more, more aggressively, the challenges with that kind of growth are entirely different. And I'll tell you, these days, and probably the last 5 years that I've been involved in Mastermind, 90% of my focus is on management and operations. And for me now, at this point, case generation is just like, crank it up, crank it down. Like, what is our capacity? How many cases can we handle? How many more people can I afford to hire this quarter? And, do we need to dial it up, dial it back? But at that volume, your operations have to be really dialed in. And that's a whole nother challenge.
Yeah, and that's why I've got it set up like that. If you'll notice, man, I got like the 8-figure group, because once you get 8 figures, doing 10 million or more, you figured out how to get cases. I mean, that's not the problem. But they got to figure out how to scale, and that goes back to the Gerber and the EOS method, and that's all management. That's why you notice that 80 to 90% of what we talk about in 8-figure mastermind groups, management. I mean, once in a while somebody comes up with something new, marketing that's, cutting edge. But I'd say 80%, 90 is about management. Know how to get cases, and they wouldn't be doing 10 million plus. That's just the truth. But you're right. It's grassroots, and then you either got to build it up, save it, or you've got like hit a case, or you can do like I did. I just went out. I had practice for like 12, 14 years before I really went into it. I went out, got $500,000 credit, put up all my real estate, everything I own. I mean, I gambled my life savings, chance, and it paid off, but it could have went south. And my wife was saying the same thing. Are you sure you know what you're doing? Because we could be sleeping in the streets if this doesn't work. So it takes some courage, I think, and the mindset. You've got to be. We talked about it, perseverance and stuff like that. But there's so many ways to. There's the books out there. I mean, there's a book called Never Eat Alone. I mean, I read that many, many years ago. And you got to eat lunch somewhere. So why not take somebody out? It ain't got to be, at Ruth Chris Steakhouse. It can be, the local diner, and make use of your time and things like you're talking about. And the clients you got, push them to send you cases. Do things, big systems that don't cost a lot of money. There's just so many things you can do to do it. But you're right. You got to crawl before you walk. You got to walk. But I think the big deal is mindset and doing a lot of this.
I think we're all a little crazy. like not lawyers, but law firm owners, law firm founders, entrepreneurs. And not all of us are entrepreneurs, and we figure that out somewhere along the way, right? But like we have to believe, like you have to believe in order to succeed, right? And from the outside, it can look delusional because the numbers don't support it, right? It's like in my mind, I'm already successful, even though I can't pay the bills and I don't have any clients and I'm just grinding every day. But in my mind, like I never imagined I would be where I am today. But like to leverage everything you own and put all your life savings into the firm when it hasn't manifested yet, it's because in your head, it's already real. Like you just need to go, you need to walk from here to there. But from the outside, we all look crazy because we're taking so much risk with no security, but we know that if we do the work and we every day show up and take a step. This has been my talk, when I've gone to the summit and talked before, right? It's always the same. Know where you are, know where you want to be, and never stop grinding, never stop moving from point A to point B. And if you do that with single-minded purpose, the outcome is inevitable. And I think people who aren't entrepreneurs, people who aren't founders, they don't get that.
Yeah. And I think that's why masterminds are so important is that you get in with people that are like-minded like you, that understand you, because most people don't understand this, to be honest with you. And another thing that you learn is what not to do, because
Yeah.
what to do is important, but what not to do is also important. Save money, not make mistakes. And to be honest with you, when I was doing it, I didn't have the luxury of a mastermind. There was no such thing. And I had to,
Right.
it's all trial and error. And, I call them learning experiences, but some of them were very expensive, to be honest with you, and some of them weren't. But it's kind of like a shortcut. You're talking about speaking. You're going to be speaking this May at the summit. I'm bringing you back. You always give really good reviews, and you're always a good communicator. What are you going to talk about this year?
Well, it's a perfect transition, right? Because once you hit that eight-figure mark, now like your intake team doesn't know what your case management team is even doing. It's like they're in different countries and they speak different languages, right? And so it's all about systems and processes and delegation. And so, the title of my talk at the summit next month is From Rainmaker to Architect, right? And I always resented when I heard every management book says, right, at some point when a business scales, the founder becomes the bottleneck. I was actually a little bit offended by that. Like, how dare you call me a bottleneck? I built this and I solved every problem that ever came up. I'm the answer to every question. I'm the solution to every problem. And how could you say I'm the bottleneck? But if you listen to that, right? If I'm the solution to every problem and I'm the answer to every question, and I've scaled up to, 1,700 active files and 90 people working in the firm, that means our capacity to get anything done is limited by me answering questions and solving problems. And I'm as great as I think I am, right? And because I'm filled with ego, right? As a lawyer and a law firm founder, I can't do that. So I did all this, like everything I've done in my career, I'm behind the curve. I waited too long to build a leadership team and delegate power. But even my leadership team, I had a director of intake and I had a director of case management and I had a managing attorney. I still reserved the right to make every decision and to solve every problem. And they would identify it and they would try and manage people and they'd bring stuff back to me. And then I literally built a culture around, let's see what Matt thinks. And I think I was probably 2 years behind. I mean, it was just in the last 6 months that like I legitimately transitioned from an operator to a CEO. And literally in the last 6 months, I've hired a complete C-suite. So my managing attorney became my chief operations officer and my firm administrator became my chief culture and strategy officer, which encompasses business operations, vendor relations, and HR and recruiting. And then I promoted my data and analytics director to chief technology officer. I've got a new managing attorney, and I hired a fractional chief marketing officer and a fractional chief financial officer. And so, but it's not just, you can't just give these titles and hire people. Like first you have to find the right people. They have to be aligned with your values and your mission, right? But then this is really the key. You need to delegate real authority, like real authority. They don't need to come check with me. Now, each of them has a contract and a role description that has escalation parameters, right? If there's a decision that crosses departments or it exceeds a certain monetary value or something like that, you have to escalate to the CEO. But other than that, they own their domain and they can make decisions within their domain and they're responsible for the outcomes. And so, I do a quarterly business review for each department. I do a quarterly one-on-one review for all my executives. And we're just in the process of doing the very first ones. We just did my first QBR ever as CEO yesterday. It was the finance QBR with my COO and my CFO. And we had our CPA and our bookkeeper in the meeting. And it was amazing. Like I have a really clear high level picture of the firm's kind of financial snapshot, where reality differs from assumptions and, what needs to happen, not for me to do, right? But what needs to happen from our COO or managing attorney or somewhere else. But it's fantastic. And my job now is really, it's long-term strategic planning. It's communicating and coordinating, and it's being an architect, building a framework in which everyone knows what they own and what they don't own and how they interface with everyone else. And there's nothing in the firm that doesn't have an owner, and there's nothing in the firm that has more than one owner. And I don't own anything except making sure that they're all working within the system.
Right.
And, I built an operating system. Like, this is how we lead at Dubin Law Group. And they need to go back to that. And there's also clear criteria for how I'm going to be evaluating them as executives. So it's all very new, but I can feel it like unlocking the next 10x of growth, where like we were just like before I hired my first employee, like I was stubbornly holding on to my old ways and banging my head against the wall. Like even though we were still growing, like we were so stressed. We were so overworked. All my leadership team, each one of them was wearing like 5 hats. And, burnout was imminent. And now, like, we've literally unlocked this growth potential just by me. Like, delegating doesn't mean like you figure out what the problem is and then bring it back to me and I'll solve it. Delegating means you own this. You're accountable. I don't care how hard you work. You're accountable for the outcome. So go fix it, and then we'll check it later and see how you're doing. And you're judged on outcomes. And so far, I think this is really going to be the key to getting to that next level and really being able to play with the big boys.
I know Ken Hardison and other people, some of my mentors have said over the years that every time you like double your business, you have to re-engineer it. You got to re-engineer the infrastructure. That's where you're at now. You re-engineered it. But when you started, it was like everybody wearing a lot of hats, and then maybe a little few less hats. But then now you've gone to this next deal, and if you double what you're doing now in the next couple of years, you'll probably tweak to this. Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, it might be instead of having a fractional, you got a full-time CFO and a full-time. But the deal is you'll have to re-engineer. You have to do some things to get capacity to go to the next level.
And maybe you bring stuff in-house that you're outsourcing, right? Like maybe we build an in-house like marketing department instead of using an ad agency, we do it ourselves. Although like agencies bring a lot of efficiency in media buying and things like that, but like maybe we bring that in-house. We currently work with an outside bookkeeper. One of the first things my CFO said is like, we need to build an in-house finance team. So it's like, it's a whole new thing, right? And so even we're just at the leading edge of this, right? When I made my data and analytics person my chief technology officer, it immediately became apparent we need an IT specialist. Even though we have an outside IT company, we need an in-house liaison between all of our employees and our IT company. We need somebody to set up all the new laptops when we have a new employee and things like that. And we haven't talked at all about AI, but like we're hiring a full-time AI engineer. I will not be behind the curve on AI. AI isn't just coming, like AI is here. Like AI can and should be integrated with every single task, every single action that we do in operations from before intake, from marketing, even before intake, all the way to like final dispersal and post settlement contact with clients and maintaining that database and everything in between. There's not a single thing we do in our operations that can't be made more efficient, more effective through the judicious application of AI. And sometimes it'll be a product somebody else developed that we buy. And sometimes it's going to be applications that we develop in-house. And, now this year, 2026, really is the rise of the AI agent. And you can have agents doing all kinds of things that really frees up your people to do the things that are uniquely human, that really add value for the client. Because right now, all of our staff, all of our people are spending too many hours doing like rote, repetitive work that just it needs to be done and it can be replaced by AI. So we're still trying to figure all that out, but we've convened an AI council in our firm. We have members of every department that meet once a week. And the first thing we did is we set guidelines and parameters, like this is how we use AI. The second thing we did is we got an enterprise account for our firm because it's secured and it's encrypted and it's HIPAA compliant.
Which one did you get?
We're using ChatGPT Enterprise.
Okay.
And look, I listen to a lot of AI podcasts. I try and stay on top of it. The new product is released every week and they're chasing each other on the benchmarks. My opinion is at this point for what we do, it almost doesn't matter what you use. You just need to be using it. And I just want to say to every law firm owner who's watching this or listening to this, if you have employees, they're already using AI. And, if you don't have guidelines and if you don't have a secure AI chatbot or LLM or whatever you're using, they're using their own and it's unsecured. And they're putting confidential client information on it and they're using it to help them with their workflow and answer questions. And that's not good. You're at risk for that because AI is part of how they solve problems now. And so you need to be proactive about that. First, survey your employees. How many of you are using AI at work? And I think people might be surprised that at least a third of your people are already using their own, free version of whatever AI they like to use at work. And you need to facilitate that. You need to govern that within guardrails. So you're fulfilling your ethical responsibilities to your clients. You're not putting their private information out there in the cloud. This is coming, right? And I'm terrified of being left behind because the early adopters of AI are going to have such a huge advantage over the firms that aren't using AI that it may be insurmountable, right? Because it's going to build on itself, right? So don't get left behind on AI.
Yeah. Well, I'm a big proponent of that. Even though I'm, probably almost 70 years old and know how to type, but I see the importance of it. I use it every day in my business. I was one of the first ones to go out and do an AI conference for PI lawyers.
Yep.
All it. And I'm pushing it, all the masterminds. Wait on this, be smart about it, but you got to get your people got to be using this stuff. And if they're not using it, then you need people that will use it. This will make them work faster and more effective.
Yeah. I want to give you credit, Ken, because you recommended a book to me called AI First by a guy named Adam Brotman, who actually graduated law school with me in 95. And then, went into the corporate world and all that. And then he left all the boards of directors and all that to build this AI consulting firm and wrote this book. And it was reading that book, AI First, that really opened my eyes because My attitude towards AI is I'm an old dog. I don't want to learn new tricks. It's too
Yeah,
much work. All the applications that I saw they weren't quite there yet. Right. And
yeah,
then all of a sudden in the last 12, 18 months, it's like it all clicks. Right. And then I read this book and it's like, it's here. It's
yeah,
here now. And my people are a little bit scared. I've read this too, right? Like Gen Z. Is it Gen Z? Yeah, it's Gen Z, right? They're in the
yeah.
workforce, the young ones, the early 20s. Like they're terrified that AI is going to replace them. They're going to lose their job. And I keep telling them, I'm reassuring them, like, look, we can redeploy you in a more effective way, but we're not going to
Yeah.
lay off a third of our people because we have AI. What we're going to do is we're going to unleash your ability to be better, to be more efficient and more effective and more human in your interactions with clients, with coworkers, with vendors, to do the things that AI can't do that we need you for. But I tell them, like, AI is not going to replace people, but people who use AI are going to replace people who don't use AI. So if you work
That's
at
good.
my firm, you're going to use AI.
Yeah. And I think that's absolutely right. And the deal is, you just might not be able, you might not want to hire as many people as quickly because you're able to be more productive with what you've got. What I'm saying, like you were saying, every quarter I got to see how much can I spend to hire new help. I think that's going to be less. And you can
Yeah.
tell the capacity to handle larger volumes with less humans.
We'll
I think that's
see.
the key. I don't
We'll
know.
see. I've gone over the years, I've had one attorney, pre-lit up to like 300 cases. And I've been as low as like one lawyer at 100 cases. And there's arguments for both. If when you
Yeah,
reduce caseload, the attorney can really build a relationship with the client. They can really add value to each case. And it's the attorney that's the bottleneck, right? It's not the staff, it's not the case manager or the paralegal. It's the attorney. An attorney needs to have a relationship with their client. And there's a limit, even with AI, I think, to how much they could do. But we've experimented. Like we have some attorneys who have double the staff, double the caseload. And what I'm seeing, especially in the last couple of years, is that on a per case basis, they're just as productive, if not more so, than the ones that have half the staff and half the caseload. So we went from, everybody with 250 cases to cutting it all in half and spreading out the staff across more lawyers. And like maybe we'll go back to consolidating more staff with each lawyer and piling on more caseload. Maybe AI will let us do that, but I think this is important to me and it should be important to all, personal injury law firm owners is that we're a service business. We are here to serve our clients. And it's not just about getting them the most money. It's about educating them, advising them, counseling them, making them feel comfortable, helping them develop trust in us that we're their advocates. And I think when you spread your people, your lawyers especially, too thin, it's hard to give the client that authentic human experience that I think is
right.
what we're supposed to be all about.
Yeah, I agree with you. Well, listen, I'm looking forward to seeing you. Any parting words before we call it a day? That lawyers out there, any words of wisdom, golden nuggets?
Heroics are fun, but over time, systems beat heroics. When you delegate, delegate for real and don't take it back. Trust what you built.
Yeah,
Trust what you built. And if it's not working, then fix it. But get out of your own way. The things about you that allowed you to build a successful firm are the exact things that are going to get in the way of your ability to scale your firm. So put your ego aside and take a step back and let your people, even if they're all only 80 or 85 or 90% of what you can do, delegate real authority and trust, and then hold them accountable.
there you go. Absolutely. Well, listen, I look forward to seeing you next month in San Antonio, my friend.
San Antonio, have to have some good Tex-Mex.
There you go. There you go.
All
Until
right.
next time, this is Ken Hardison. Dedicated to your success. Take care.
You have been listening to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, the podcast that leads lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Go to growyourlawfirm.com to find more ways to market and manage your law firm. Please leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts.